very first time.
They could hear the bird song from their crib and long to be out and onto the good earth. Oh, am I unmuted now? Baby Joe loved the outdoors. They could hear the bird song from their crib and long to be out and onto the good earth. Baby Joe had a traumatic first few months of life. They had been saved by the devotion of angels, those spirits of life who wore white uniforms and caps. Angels kept Baby Joe alive when they didn't care if they lived or died. Baby Joe was a miracle for a 50s baby. They failed to thrive in the hospital where only the messengers of light fed them, cuddled them, and prayed over them. One particular nurse was nursing her own infant. Nurse decided that the way to save Baby Joe was to feed them from her breast milk, the way she nourished her own babe. Her daily shifts gave Baby Joe enough will to live as she prayed, sang, cuddled, and fed them. After nearly 4 months, it was time for Baby Joe to go home. Baby Joe screamed and screamed. Their new parents stopped at the pediatrician's office before even going home. The old doc said, "That baby is fine. Sedate the mother." Since it was Mom's first child and complicated by being an adoption, she decided to take Baby Joe home and have a drink. Mom and Dad were in their 30s and lived on an acre of lakefront in a home meant for a summer cottage. Baby Joe loved the sounds of the water lapping on the shore. They loved the halved logs whose flat sides made the interior walls of the little house. They spent many hours seeing their spirit friends peeking out of the wood grain. There was a massive sandstone fireplace running the width of the living room. The wood fire blazed gleefully, brightening and heating their world. An enormous hickory tree grew over the house, its twin trunks over the backyard. It loomed over the picture window of the room where Baby Joe slept. The squirrels loved romping through the branches, chasing each other through the tree, feeding on its nuts, and playing hide and seek among its roots. Some were the beloved fox squirrels. The others were small, aggressive red squirrels. There was a wood paneled ceiling supporting all the wires and heat vents running under the low roof. One night, the red squirrels got in and began chewing on the wires. Baby Joe awoke, bathed in sweat and smelling fire. Not the comforting aroma of wood smoke, but a sharp, singeing scent of electricity. Screaming and screaming at full volume, they woke Mom and Dad before there was too much damage. Baby Joe was a shero. As Baby Joe grew, another trip was planned back to the hospital where they were born. Would they be going back to be given up? Would this be the end of their relationship with their parents? Would they lose their room with the big window where they watched friend Heron fish every morning, where the warmth of the fire lingered in the stone long after the flames died out? They recalled the bird song, squirrels playing, and the frogs croaking in the deep blue of twilight. The sound of red-winged blackbirds raising the alarm that old Mrs. Randall's cat was prowling about the marsh. Baby Joe was both excited and scared approaching the door. Their body was on high alert for a peek at Nurse. Would she be there to embrace them again? They longed for the smell of milk and floral soap that once sustained their life. Even with their hypervigilance, there was no sight of familiar white caps, corridors, or rooms. They were in someone's office. The social worker there, called Miss Arts, was holding another baby, a quiet, placid baby boy. He was to go home with them. He was the new baby. And with that, baby Joe grew up to be little Joe. Little Joe toddled about, getting into everything. They were curious, assertive, and unafraid. After all, hadn't they conquered their biggest foe, death? Death came for all life. In the autumn, the beautiful greens of the trees and shrubs turned to gorgeous golds, reds, yellows, and fell into the yard. The grass, still holding the green beauty, was especially vibrant against the contrasting leaves. The short days culminated in winter. All the houses around the summer cottage lay empty except for that of old Mrs. Randall. She had put her brilliant flower garden to sleep under a massive pile of those fallen love notes from the birches and cottonwoods in her yard. There was a garden plot of vegetables across the street, which grew carrots and lettuce, radishes, peas, and beans. Little Joe had sampled this bounty with amazement, dirt and all. These raw growing plant babies gave a crunchy, tasty delight to their mouth and tongue, so unlike the cooked versions Mom made. The dark nights of winter were cold and sparkling lights in the sky. Starlight, star bright, first star I see tonight. Wish I may, wish I might have the wish I wish tonight, was the first spell casting they remembered learning. Or maybe it was make a wish and blowing out the candles on the birthday cake. They grew and they grew with deep reverence for the air, sky, water, fire, and earth, for life. When the daylight came earlier, they watched for the return of Heron, the friend who so sensibly left the frozen lake for the winter. The first sign that Heron would come was when the red-winged sentinels came to scout the marsh for the flock. The waters would come back to life as the frogs laid their gelatinous green eggs in the masses near the shore, where the giant black willow dipped her yellowing long branches into the water. Breaking the ice on the puddles that froze overnight was a morning ritual. Little Joe would put on their rubbers and smash around the yard and dirt road, creating that satisfying sound of crackling ice succumbing to their weight. So much safer and within their control than when Mom broke dishes. Watch, observe, learn the signs, predict the moment to run. Before Mom's green eyes flamed in rage, and then run. So outdoors became the refuge. They took little brother and roamed the lakefront, the woods, and the fields. They explored and went on adventures, like finding the turtles crawling out of the lake to lay eggs in the flower garden of old Mrs. Randall. These were painted turtles whose black carapaces were adorned with bright red markings. The tiny babies would hatch in the flowers, and little Joe would play with them for hours, always believing they were made by the mother turtle from the eggshells, coffee grounds, and red blossoms of the garden nursery. The cottonwood trees also blew in the spring, blanketing the new grass with a layer of fluffy white that was reminiscent of the recent snows. Little Joe knew to look carefully around the base of the trunk for the gray, knobby bumps that would come after the first warm rains. These were to be announced at the top of one's lungs, slightly out of breath from running to find the closest parent. These were the precious morel mushrooms that bursted from the ground overnight and must be harvested with a sharp knife. Not a job for children. The tiny grape hyacinths and dandelions were the first flowers. Dandelions were just as much joy in their fading as their blooming. The full globe of tiny fluffy seeds rose on the breath as one blew their dreams into them to be carried out into the world. When Robin came back to the yard and cocked her head to listen for earthworms for breakfast, little Joe did too. People asked, whatever is going on? and when espying them laying in the grass, ear pressed to the ground, listening to the earthworms, gained a smile or a frown, depending on the disposition of the questioner. No matter to little Joe, they were busy uncoding the travels of the worm, crawling under the dark black earth, leaving castings to further enrich the soil. One day in spring was very special to Mom, little brother, and little Joe. It was the 1st of May. On that day, they would all fold tiny paper baskets with just enough room to fill with yellow dandelion blooms. These would be hung on old Mrs. Randall's door. Then the best part came, knocking on the door and running away, hiding behind the cottonwood to peer out to see her collect the baskets. May Day had come. Another tree-hugging nature worshiper is born.
That was fabulous, Patty. Thank you so much for a lovely story. I'm going to